Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Welcome back to Core and Balance. So again, my name's Eric and I'll just jump right in. Today's discussion is going to be about money. You guys have seen that the AE86 is now done. You've seen through the build series what it took to get to this point. But the last crucial element that you guys are still missing is how much did it actually cost to get to this point? So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you guys today. I normally don't like talking about money or talking about how much was spent, but an exception has to be made for this circumstance because it's actually a really important topic. So I've been around the same type of situation a couple of times in my life, and I've noted through my experience that there are a couple of fallacies that can come into play. So number one, when building a car or modding a car, the rate at which costs can accrue really increases rapidly, especially when you pass a certain threshold or level. So that's why it's all the more important to be transparent and to keep track of the money spent. So it's really all too easy to not keep a budget and blow things out of proportion. I'm actually guilty of that myself with the AE86. I initially wanted to do a very mild build with the AE86, but of course I went all out the window soon enough. And I did that is because in my case, I just didn't want to sacrifice the end product or package to meet a certain ceiling or budget. But in any case, when you don't keep good accounting, that's a fatal mistake because it's very easy to just buy a car with a low cost of entry, but then that can soon enough snowball and triple or even quadruple in costs. When you build a car, you build it over a span of time, of course, and you spread out the costs that are associated with it. So this diminishes the impact that you feel when you're spending this money on the parts and such, right? But you're still, at the end of the day, spending $500 here, $1,000 here, maybe even $2,000 there, and those costs add up extremely fast. And that leads me into my second point. Every single mod and part that you add to a car, every single work that you do to a car counts. So it's very easy to just look at a mod list and just breeze right through it. But then it leads to a very flawed and dismissive generalization that another similar car of the same model looks somewhat close, and then factor in its price instead. But it doesn't work that way. And a good analogy to this is, for example, you can go out to the Porsche dealer, you can buy a new 911 for about $70K with some options, or you can go to the same Porsche dealer and buy that same 911 that's somewhat close with $130K in options. And subsequently, the values of those cars are not the same. They might look the same at a cursory glance, but that's really the point here. You have to really dive deep in a car, especially one that's modded, and look underneath the surface. Look at all the parts done, look at all the work that is done, and really make an accurate assessment. And the same concept applies here when you're building up or modding a car, because building a car is so open-ended that it can lead to vast differences. I mean, one guy can build a car this way, another guy can build it in a completely different way. And those two people can have completely different budgets. And even with the AE86, I still did most of the work myself, but the parts, of course, cost a lot of money, and that adds up quick. And then for things like relying on professionals to do a proper job in fabrication and paint work, that again is added costs. So all that stuff really adds up fast. But anyway, with that said, let's go ahead and get on with it. So let me go grab the car, and I'll see you back here in a second.
And I am back, and I also brought out the car too. So before we actually start with the breakdown of all the car parts and the tally, it's probably worth noting how much I actually paid for this car. So I found this thing about 1.5 years ago, of course. It's a low owner count, SoCal car all its life, no rust, of course, 133,000 miles, original GTS, and what came on it was, of course, a beam swap, which is a very straightforward stock beam swap. I have Fortunato coilovers, and it was also fully repainted. So that was like the extent of most of its mods, and that thing cost me $13,000, give or take. So we'll start that as a baseline. Not 100% sure how accurate all the pricing is going to be, but we'll get it kind of close. It's kind of just going off the top of my head, but we'll start at the back. Big one first, the Cybon carbon fiber hatch. That thing was about $700 bucks. Koki JDM rear bumper. I think I paid about $600 for that thing. RS-Harada / Brave exhaust, which is a Catback. I paid, how much was that thing? $650. Let's see. Oh yeah, the redline tails. That actually came with the car itself, so I'm not going to include that in this pricing. This spoiler, the JDM hatch spoiler, whatever, I think I paid about $400, $300 for that thing. Just say $300. These Koki rear mud flaps, paid $200 for these. These RS Watanabes directly from the factory itself in Japan, paid with the tires mounted and balanced, I think out the door was about $1,900. JDM OEM side skirts, $1,100 bucks. These things were kind of pricey. JDM front bumper, Chirano bumper. This thing was, after shipping from Japan, $900. And below the front bumper is the JDM Zenki front lip. I think I paid about $400 bucks for that. And all the pricing of that I'm listing for the body parts obviously does not include paint and work. just the parts themselves. I'll get to the paint stuff later. And now that we're at the front, we're also at the hood. So there was a lot of pieces involved to get this hood together. You have the side-bond carbon fiber base, you have the TBO Japan vents, you have the molding work, you have the multiple paint work. So all that, all said and done together, was about $2,400 to get this hood done. And then we also have small stuff like these corner lights in the front for the bumper, which I bought new, $250. Project Kicks lug nuts, $170. JDM rain guard, I think I spent about $220, something like that, plus polishing work, which was another 80 bucks. So $300 total for this rain guard. GTS twin cam side decals, I think they were about $60 from the dealer. And I had to buy 3 pairs of these because I kept messing them up. Carbon sunroof, this thing was $350. And now let's go ahead and move inside the interior. All right, let's start with the steering setup. Nardi classic wheel, 300 bucks. Toyota Rosso horn button, that thing was 100 bucks. Wrap Fix flipper unit, that thing was 100 bucks as well. The quick release itself, 380. The work spell hub, I think that thing was about 150. JDM Apex seats, after shipping from Japan, 600 bucks. OEM IS300 pedal set. Obviously I don't have the gas one installed, so we'll just go ahead and divide the total, which was 140 in half, just cuz. 70 bucks. And now let's move to the sound system. So I have hybrid audio, speakers all around. The head unit is a Alpine ILX 007. I have a ARC amp just behind the seat, mounted right there. And of course, everything all combined, all the speakers, the head unit, the amp, the wiring kit was 1,200 bucks. T3 hatch bar that had chromed. The chrome job was more than the bar itself. That thing was 380. Black uncracked dash that I swapped in. This thing was 500 bucks. There's a new Braille battery in the trunk. That thing was 200 bucks. 4 cocoa mats all around. That thing was 280. So that covers most of the interior stuff. I'm not covering some of the maintenance items and work that I did. Like for example, refreshing the window regulators from Japan. This glass is actually different too. I also changed out, for example, this trim. Got this trim from Japan because the previous one was a little bit scuffed. And I also spent work at an upholstery shop having these rear quarter trim panels fixed too because the fabric was sticking out in the beginning. But all that stuff is not included in this mod list. All right, now let's talk about the drivetrain. So with the wear axles, it came with an entire rebuild of the third member and also came with side gears, solid shims, the axles themselves. It caused two-way LSD that was installed. And the entire kit for the rear differential setup was $2,200. Moving more towards the front of the drivetrain, the clutch kit that was installed inside the transmission, that thing was, can't even see it from here, it's too low. So it has an Ogura clutch kit, that thing was $800. And bear in mind, there's a lot of fabrication work that went into this car. The mid-pipe was custom made. All the engine stuff that you saw around the header that had to be custom. The ECU box was custom. The T3 frame rail braces that had to be welded in on top and underneath, that was also fabrication. So all in all, the fabrication was about $3,800 in expenses. But that also includes some labor work around the steering rack in terms of changing out the intermediate shaft, putting a new U-joint, fixing up the slop that was in the center of the steering in the beginning. Now let's talk about some paintwork figures, including also the custom extension of this front lip. This thing was chopped in half and also extended to clear the front bumper a little bit better. But the paintwork and custom molding of that lip, the bumper, the hood, the side mirrors, the side skirts, dark tinting the sunroof, dark tinting the hatch, painting the spoiler, painting this rear bumper. All that stuff combined was about $3,000. But we'll subtract about 600 bucks, which was just one of the repaints that I had to do for this hood. But I already kind of grouped it in when I told you the whole price of this hood. So, and bear in mind, we're not even talking about the full repaint of the shell itself. This car was repainted in 2-stage black, like the original color, with a prismatic effect in the clear coat. So that was bundled into the car price. Okay, back in my garage, and I apologize for the lack of continuity. I had to leave the other location because I was meeting up with a photographer. But anyway, let's go ahead and finish up this list. The other 3 major topics to cover are number 1, the engine, 2 is the suspension, and 3 are the brakes. All right, so before we begin, let's get a few things off of the list, which includes, of course, the engine itself. The beams and the tranny was already included with the car, and so was that Koyo radiator, so we won't include them in the list. But let's go ahead and start with this big item right here, and that is the HyTech equal length header. This thing was a one-off, custom made, 1,800 bucks. I think I already talked about the fabrication stuff, so all the work around making this ECU box, the header heat shield, chopping up this water housing, all that work, not included.
but the ECU, the Link ECU, was $1,500. TRD Oil Cap, I have no idea, $50, I guess. These Brown & Miller Teflon Aeromotive fiber machine crimped -6AN fuel lines, $400. So now let's cover some stuff in bulk and talk about the entire ITB conversion and all of the SQ Engineering related parts. And that also includes the SQ Engineering Billet shifter pedestal. But these throttle bodies, they are 20 valve ported Surfab 45mm throttle bodies. Pipercross filters, trumpets underneath, an entire manifold, including that billet manifold, all that stuff, all the rest of the SQ Engineering stuff, $4,600. There's a lot of stuff inside this box aside from just the ECU, including the Link CAN Lambda wideband sensor. That thing was $350. JSP billet radiator mounts, $85. T3 cooling panel, $90. Ballard Garage Willowwood big brake kit in the front, $1,000. And this hub right here is a billet T3 hub. That thing was $500 with ARP studs. And since we're still at the front, the sway bar down there, that thing is a Cusco sway bar, $300. I know we're kind of going out of order, but going back to the brakes, the rears are a Silk Road big brake kit. Features a S13 rotor. So the kit and the rotors were about $380. Now going back to the suspension, obviously you can't really see on the video, but aside from the Cusco front sway bar that I just mentioned, all the T3 stuff, including the lower control arms, all the panhard bars, the 4 links, the traction brackets, etc., all the T3 catalog stuff, that was about roughly $1,800. And again, the Fortune Auto coilovers were included with the car, so I'm not going to include in this list, but they were $1,400 if you buy them on that list. And then the radial bearings I did buy, and I did change out the Swift springs, and I think those amounted to about $480. And here's something you can't see. Just behind this fender is a T3 fender brace. That thing was $220. Ray brake headlights, $230. Okay, I think that's comprehensive enough of a run through without getting too much in the weeds of the details, but that covers most of the major stuff. Obviously, I'm leaving off a lot of the small details and all of the in-between stuff that you would never see in a mod list. Things like the Weldon braces and the double run rear panhard brace I didn't even include in the list. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I left off. Like for example, just this foil right here, that thing was expensive, left that off as well. But this gives you an idea of how much it takes just to get to this point. So the total cost so far with all the mods that I've listed and the purchase price of the car is this. And that does not, again, include the beam swap, the repaint. And actually we also have to add in the shop cost of the dyno tuning, the balancing of the ITBs, the timing of the engine, some of the miscellaneous labor work that I had to pay for, the multiple alignments, the centering of the steering rack with the high angle spacers to get it all centered. All that stuff, all the other shop work, the dyno tuning, etc. That thing was almost $3,000 in costs. All right guys, so there you have it. Hopefully this gives you a picture of what it takes to really build a car to this extent, I guess. Things can really snowball fast and add up very fast, so just be careful out there. And the more detailed you are, the less stones you leave unturned with a build, of course, the more it's gonna cost you. So the stuff isn't cheap, it isn't easy, but that is reality. So with that said, hopefully this video was insightful, and I will catch you guys on the flip side. Peace!